10 extreme rides you shouldn't go on. Number 10. Smiler, Alton Towers. The Smiler is an extreme steel roller coaster that opened at the Alton Towers theme park in the UK in 2013. Pictures don't do justice to how insane this looping ride is, and it currently holds the world record for having the most inversions, with a total of 14, which includes 5 corkscrews, 3 dive loops, a sea serpent, a cobra roll, a sidewinder, and a heartline roll. It's undoubtedly one of the most intense rides in the world, but it has also developed a reputation for having serious safety concerns too. A malfunction on its opening day meant that riders had to wait a further 2 months before they could experience it for themselves. In 2013, a set of guide wheels detached and hit and injured 4 riders, while the worst incident occurred in 2015 when a safety mechanism failed. 2 trains collided into each other, and the injuries of the riders were so severe that 2 of them had to have a leg amputated. The ride remained closed for almost a year after this to make the necessary safety adjustments. But if you're ever planning to go on this ride, remember there's a chance you might not be left smiling by the end of it. Number 9. Tamera. Tamera has been a popular ride around the world since it was first opened in 1984, where it was taken around various fairs in Germany. It was then taken to the Sunway Lagoon Park in Malaysia for 2 years, then Flamingo Land in the UK for 5 years, before taking up a permanent residence at the La Feria Chapultepec Magico in Mexico. The coaster was the first in the world to have 3 vertical loops, but if you want a chance to experience this historic ride, you'll want to be careful. It was involved in an incident in 2004 when a ride operator was injured, and in September of 2019, the rear car derailed and threw its riders to the ground, 2 of whom died. Number 8. SCAD Dives. SCAD dives, which stand for Suspended Catch Air Device, are a new type of extreme experience that are unique in that riders are completely released from any kind of restraint altogether. The idea is that you're dropped from a height of about 160 feet in the air and fall into a safety net that's below. The first versions of this involved jumping from a helicopter, but due to safety concerns, the jumps are now more commonly done from a fixed platform. Still, with the fact that people aren't physically held into anything while they're falling, there's an element of unpredictability about each SCAD dive. If the wind blows at the wrong moment, or the calculations about the position of the net are wrong, then what should be an enjoyable experience can soon turn to disaster. As venues keep pushing their designs to be even more exhilarating, the risk of this happening are increasing, and there are at least a couple of accidents involving them every year. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe to Top 5s with notifications on. Number 7. Aran Park, Tehran. Aran Park in Tehran, Iran looks like what you'd imagine Disneyland would if it had been designed by people who didn't care about safety and made no effort to maintain the structures since they were first built. The poorly drawn Mickey Mouse logos around the park give you an idea of what this place is trying to be. But it's the roller coaster with cars that look like soda cans that offers visitors an extreme ride, but one that veers very close to the line between excitement and danger. The cars travel at breakneck speeds through the twists and turns, with one loop that's so narrow you can hardly believe you'll make it around. Visitors often complain of severe back and neck pain after riding on this coaster, and the thought of going round successive loops like this with nothing but a lap bar to hold you in your seat seems too risky to be worth the thrill. Number 6. Air Max 360. The biggest traveling fairs see rides and amenities coming from around the world to make up a temporary theme park. But while some of the rides may seem on par with the extreme designs seen in some of the world's biggest amusement parks, their safety requirements aren't held to the same stringent levels. Hull Fair in the UK is one of the largest ones in Europe and features all the types of rides you'd expect. One of the most popular is called the Air Max 360, which sees riders strapped into pods of 2 while the entire thing spins around at ferocious speed. In October of 2019, however, the restraints opened while the ride was operating, and a woman was flung from it into the base of another ride. She survived, but it was then realized that a ride of the exact same design had been responsible for the death of a 10-year-old girl in Australia a few years before. While many thousands of people have been on it and enjoyed themselves, there's definitely more risk with this than many others that you could go on instead. Number 5. Disco Dancer. Rides that use centrifugal force as they spin around are popular throughout the world. But even if you're not too worried about feeling dizzy after it's ended, there are other risks you need to take into account before ever setting foot on one. The main problem faced by these rides is maintenance. Because they rely on people being pushed against the edges, if there's a fault, things can be catastrophic, and incidents are more common than you'd might think. The worst accident involving this type of ride took place at the Kishkinta amusement park in India. The Disco Dancer has a spinning disc that swings side to side along a track, had been closed during floods for a few months. The operators began to run tests to make sure it was okay to open to the public, but instead of using test dummies for these trial runs, they convinced workers from around the park to get on the ride, and things took a turn for the worse almost immediately. Some eyewitnesses reported hearing creaking noises as soon as it began to move along the track. Then there was a snapping noise. The platform flipped over, killing one person and injuring another 9. Number 4. Thunder River Rapids. If you go to any amusement park in the world, the chances are there'll be a version of a river rapids ride that become especially popular on hot days. Sat in a large raft, riders are taken along the course of a river, with powerful jets making the raft spin and bump into the sides. They're often seen as one of the safest rides in the park, but they come with a certain amount of risk. In 2016, for example, one of the rafts on the Thunder River Rapids at Dreamworld on the Australian Gold Coast flipped over. The 4 adults on board were trapped underneath and drowned soon after. Number 3. Kaesong Youth Park. The Kaesong Youth Park in Pyongyang, North Korea is a strange haven of entertainment in the city that's the center of the most isolated country on Earth. But would you or should you dare go on any of the rides here? It's one of the most popular tourist attractions in the city and was opened in 1982. While it has since had rides imported from Germany, many of the originals remain and don't appear to have had any checks on them since they were first installed. Rusty tracks and cobwebs are a regular feature of the outdated park, and while you might be tempted to try some of the coasters that have been here for almost 40 years, you'd be best off staying to the recent additions instead. Number 2. Log Flume. Log flumes are a staple at every amusement park, where log-shaped boats are carried along an artificial river before being taken up a hill and then splashing down a slope. There are countless different versions of this, but there's one thing they all need to work properly: water. In May of 2019, there was a serious incident on the log flume at Castle Park in California, where there had been a malfunction with a water pump. This meant that there wasn't enough water at the bottom of the slope to slow the boat down. So when one completed the drop, it hit the side and flipped over. There are other stories of logs flipping while dropping down the flume, possibly because the weight of the riders wasn't evenly spread, and countless times when people have suffered minor injuries when the ride didn't act as expected. All of this means that these types of rides are some of the most potentially dangerous that there are, and you should think twice before going on one. Number 1. Inferno. Inferno is an extreme roller coaster at the Terramatica amusement park in Benidorm, Spain, that sees riders sit in pods that spin on their axis while speeding along the track. It's one of the most popular rides in the park, and there's always a long queue of people waiting to be taken at speeds of up to 40 miles an hour through the colorful twists and turns. It may not come as a surprise, though, that a ride that exerts so much pressure on you has a history of incidents. Riders often report back or neck pain once they get off because of the G-forces they experience. And in 2014, there was an incident when the safety harnesses failed and a man was thrown into the ground. Perhaps worryingly, the park's management refused to acknowledge any fault with the ride's design. And after this happened, it went back into operation soon after with no structural differences. The only change they made was painting the track a different color. Would you risk it? Subscribe to Top 5s for more and check out some of our other popular videos.